We'll be talking today about negotiating for fun and profit. This is part of the Strengthening Your Skills and Build, Not Build series presented to you by Love Law Firm. First off, I want to welcome Leslie. Leslie's a dear friend of mine and a colleague, and she is a partner for the firm Outsource Your Books. And Outsource Your Books focuses on customized accounting solutions for startups, mid-sized firms, and CPAs. Leslie, can you say hello and can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Francine, for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of this. Our firm services small to medium-sized businesses. You can decide as a business owner not to have an in-house finance department, but to completely outsource your back office, and my office functions as your back office. And we also provide outsourced bookkeeping and accounting services for CPA firms to allow the CPA firms better profitability and better realization on their tax returns, because the books and records are coming to them in a complete, clear, and concise package. But thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. And thank you for being my outsource provider of my bookkeeping and finance. So thank you very much for the excellent work you do for me.
Our pleasure.
So I am the founder and principal attorney, as many of you know, at Love Law Firm. Love Law Firm focuses on serving the legal needs of entrepreneurs and small business owners throughout the New York metropolitan area. And there's just absolutely no way that we can cover the topic of negotiation properly in 50 minutes. It's literally impossible. In the past, I have taught a 3-day negotiations course, and we literally spent 3 full days working on negotiation skills, strategies, concepts, preparation. This is just a really big topic to take on. But we know that this is an essential skill for people to have as they run their businesses. And oftentimes I'll be asked, how do I'm terrible at negotiating. It's hard to negotiate. Things are difficult that way. And I ask people first and foremost, do they have children? If you have a child, you have been involved in intense negotiations since the moment that child was able to speak back to you. I'm blessed to have a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And I negotiate daily complex situations such as bedtime, bath time, whose toy that is, why you should be able to have it and your brother not, and those type of negotiations. Leslie, I think you have a couple children as well. Have you been involved in this intense negotiation for a while?
Agreed, and I feel as though if you brush up on your skills at 5 and 2.5, when the children are 15 and 12, you better have your A game ready with negotiation skills.
Yes, I will need to up it, I know. In fact, I'm terrified for when my daughter gets older. She may, in fact, rule the world. And if you aren't blessed with children, you were a child, so you were involved in negotiation with your parents. If you have siblings, you have been an expert negotiator throughout your life. What I mean to say is all of us from the very beginning have been involved in negotiation. We need to learn the give and the take and how to help make our needs known and how to understand other people's needs. And that's really all that talk is about, is that we are all born negotiators, and today you will have multiple negotiation opportunities impact you. So in getting ready for our conversation, I said, well, what does Noah Webster have to say about negotiation? And he defines it as a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. And I thought that was a really good place for us to focus today. The 3 main components. A negotiation is merely a discussion that has a purpose and it's working toward a goal. And during this next few minutes, we'll go through each of these concepts and talk about how to improve our discussion, how to aim for our purpose, how to reach the goal. And my goal is for Leslie and I to share lots of war stories of negotiations we've had that have gone well, that have gone sideways, and just to share how we've learned to be better negotiators. First, I want to
Agreed.
share. First, I want to share what the right mindset is. And I love this quote by JFK. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. And that's what we want to instill you with. Let's have confidence and go out and talk. So, enough of that. Let's talk about what the elements are of a good discussion. And Leslie, this is one that I want to direct to you right now, because when I first invited you to come participate in this, and as we've talked about, you didn't realize what I had convinced you to do.
That's true.
But you revealed to me an interesting piece of your resume. Can you please share that with everyone here?
Yes, absolutely. As a means to pay for my college education and pay for my accounting degree, I decided to take a job selling cars for a living because it provided me with unlimited income potential, and it provided me with a company car that I did not have to pay for.
That's awesome. I didn't even think about the company car piece.
That was the bonus, yes.
That's awesome. So I have now had to negotiate to buy new cars, or well, one used and two new cars, so 3 times in my life. And that was a painful process. Can you tell me, when you joined the car dealership, did they teach you anything about negotiation? Like, how did they help you prepare to begin doing this work?
Yes, absolutely. And good question. I was very lucky that when I joined the dealership, they did provide a training class that allowed us to completely understand the point of the consumer and what our role is during that discussion. And during that discussion, the greatest goal was to reduce any misunderstandings between you and the customer in front of you. That customer is coming to you for a reason. They're not walking into the dealership because they have nothing better to do with their time on the weekend. They are coming in because there was a catalyst in this. There was something that generated a need for a new car in that family, and you want to hear them clearly as to what their needs are and how you can solve that problem for them.
That's awesome. Did they ever describe, this is a thing that would drive me insane when I bought a car. And it goes to this first point, the right participants, right? And the decision makers. Because I've had this in non-car buying things where I've negotiated something out and I thought that the person across from me had the ability to close the deal. And then at the end they say, I got to go check with someone. Is there, like, did they ever talk about that whole, because that would drive me a little crazy sometimes at the car dealership. I would talk to the person who I knew and liked and, had been showing me things. And then they have to go to the desk at the back, it always seemed like, and get authority. Did they talk about the psychology of that or why they did that? Or can you help me understand the thought?
Right, and that is a little bit of an antiquated way of thought, is that the sales management team could not trust the sales professional on the dealership floor to negotiate a deal, and they did always have to receive approval for that. That probably does go back a number of years. I'm sure there's still a number of salespeople that are still of that mindset where the management team pretty much is just running the floor and not empowering the sales professionals on the floor to make their own deals and negotiate their own contracts. I hope that has phased out over the years, that at this stage of the game, the management team has train the professionals appropriately so that you don't have that experience where the customer is now sitting in that office and they've probably been there for hours already and the kids are getting cranky and you're looking to get out the door already, and now you're stuck waiting for a member of the management team to come in and renegotiate the deal that you feel you've already negotiated. So hopefully that practice is phasing out. Most consumers are not happy with that practice. Exactly what you said to me. I've just negotiated with the person I thought was a professional, and now I'm finding out late in the game that this person wasn't a professional and I need to talk to a second person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very frustrating. And I agree that that's one of the most important things in a negotiation is, are you actually talking to the right person? Because if you're not, you've just wasted a lot of time. And I know when I approach a negotiation, I've thought about it, I've prepared, and so I've lost not only the time that I spent talking to the person, it's all the mental prep time that I spent ahead. So
Right.
I can appreciate that. Have you ever, one time I was negotiating with someone and I thought it was one person, right? It was a big sale that they were trying to make into our company at the time, before I had my own firm. And I thought it was the sales guy coming to see me. So I walked into the conference room and he'd asked for a conference room. And I thought, yeah, that's fine. I figured he had, some presentation he wanted to show me up on the board and all of that. And I walked in and it was me and 4 people sitting in the room from the salespeople. And I don't think I've ever felt more alone than,
Wow.
yeah,
I'm surprised.
I was shocked that I was worthy of 4 people coming to try and pitch me something. Um, but that was one thing that it taught me to begin asking a very simple question. Who else do you plan on bringing to the negotiation? I don't know if you've ever had anything like that happen to you, Leslie.
Absolutely. So I did do the being a car professional a number of years ago. I'm sure techniques and methodologies have changed since that time, but they did tell you that if you felt you were getting nowhere with the customer before you let that customer walk out the door, certainly bring in a second person who maybe can develop a better rapport with the customer and give it one last chance to hopefully put that customer in the car, as opposed to letting them walk out the door. Because it's very difficult to get that customer back in your door a second time if you were not able to close the deal at that time. I know from experience, truly, people really don't want to waste their time going from dealership to dealership and shopping around. They really would like to develop a relationship with their salesperson and have their salesperson be, the target, the one-stop shopping, the start to finish person that can take them all the way through the process. So I would only hope that they don't have the multiple layers and, oh, now you got to go talk to the F&I guy, which, well, what's the F&I guy do? The finance and insurance guy. I'm only hoping that now in the dealership experience, it should be one-stop shopping. You just want to deal with that one professional who you can truly develop a relationship with, and that should be the end of it. You shouldn't be handed off from person to person to person.
Right. And in regular negotiations, when you go and meet a new client for your firm, or I'm meeting one for mine, it's always nice to know how many people are going to be in the room, right? So that it's proportionate. It's something where you feel like all of us are together and one person isn't overrepresented, one isn't underrepresented. We're all kind of in it together, if that makes sense.
Agreed. Right. You want to feel as though that person is on your team. You don't want this show of force where, 3 attorneys and 3 CPAs show up against the one little business owner and their administrative professional next to them. That would be a little bit too much. It's too one-sided.
Exactly. No one wants too many lawyers in one room. I know that. So in terms of right participants, we talked very briefly. You want to make sure you're dealing with the decision maker. You want to make sure that you have the right number of people. If they're bringing a team of 4 to negotiate with you, you should know that, and you should have a representative team back. If it's one-on-one, then perfect. But everything should be balanced. You don't want someone to feel that either they're being overwhelmed because you brought too many people, or that you feel that you're uncomfortable that you can be double teamed or tag teamed. Another thing that I put down as elements of making a good discussion is having the right location. One time I walked in, this guy was known to just be a real jerk, and he had set up the room so that the seat that I was to take for the negotiation, it was like I was in a friggin' spotlight. There was a window and it was just bright, and he pulled the shades up so that you were literally blinded while sitting there talking to him. And fortunately, I was old enough then to learn to be a little cranky, and I just said, "Hey, can we put that blind down?" But I knew exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to intimidate me. He was trying to make me uncomfortable and not be happy in there.
Right.
and
perhaps the world it's different for you. You're an attorney, and you're trying to make the opponent in that respect be a little bit uncomfortable, right? It's different if you were negotiating the terms of a contract with your client. This is attorney against attorney, correct? And he's purposely trying to make you uncomfortable.
Exactly. And I thought that was a little obnoxious. So when you're doing this, and I like to approach all of my negotiations with a real pleasant atmosphere. I like my goal when I negotiate on behalf of my law firm, but more importantly, on behalf of my clients, right? I'm doing a number of negotiations for clients right now. I want to be known as the attorney who is kind, pleasant, professional, respectful, so that we earn a reputation that says if you're going to negotiate with my attorney, you're going to be treated well. And so just to step back and say that's my philosophy, and I know, Leslie, you have a similar philosophy for your firm, that when I talk about negotiations, I never talk about how to get the win, how to be the best, how to be, the most aggressive
Agreed.
negotiator. I don't believe in that. I believe in coming into negotiations where everyone wins and everyone walks away feeling that they got something good for what they were doing. So just to say that, so that's why with location and making it comfortable and making it, have people able to concentrate is to set a nice tone so that people can participate and feel comfortable and do well in it. So.
Absolutely. And I do agree that it is very important to allow your clients to be in a comfortable setting. Let them get to know who you are, what your personality is. They're not going to want to deal with you if you're aggressive, disruptive, disrespectful. You want them to know who you are. Not saying you should change your personality to fit the client, but they should get to know the real you. This is who I am. I'm a family person. I prioritize family. I prioritize my relationships and my friendships. And this is who I am 24/7. And if you enjoy the initial consultation meeting me, chances are you're going to enjoy working with me for X number of years. So you want to let that new client feel comfortable working with you, because obviously it's going to have to be a meaningful discussion. It has to be brutally honest. You're dealing with their sensitive personal matters, or you're dealing with their financial information. If they're not comfortable speaking with you, how could they possibly have a good business relationship with you?
That's right. Yeah, I completely agree. A negotiation should not feel like you've entered into combat. It should feel like you've entered into a good discussion. And just like when I have people over for dinner parties at my house, I pick people who I think will get along, who can have things to talk about, who can be pleasant with one another. I like to approach my meetings with counterparties, future clients, the same way. Is let's have, like you were saying, Leslie, let's get to know each other a little bit. Let's invite people to treat each other as human beings and not just as someone that you want something from.
Exactly.
I made 2 notes under meaningful communication as well. And one is that honesty is the best policy. And I talk a little bit about it in another slide as well. But if you lose the trust of the other person, if they catch you in a lie, you're done. The negotiation's over. There's some posturing that you may do, but you can't blatantly lie, because if it comes out, they have no reason to trust you. There's no reason to go forward with the deal. And quite frankly, you're going to look stupid.
Absolutely.
The second thing is silence is golden. Learn to become quiet in a negotiation, especially when someone, if they are being aggressive, if they're being rude, if they're doing that, you just sit there. And in fact, the thing I love to do, and I talk about it later when someone's being really aggressive, is I just sit there, look at them pleasantly, and begin taking notes furiously. They hate that. When someone's being rude and being obnoxious, and they think that you're writing down all of the rude and obnoxious things they're saying, and you're not giving it back to them at all, it's beautiful to watch them crumble.
Francine, that's a wonderful tip. I'm glad you had shared that with us. That is such a wonderful tip. And I completely agree with you about silence being golden. I can't tell you how many times I have tried to train a member of my firm to listen to what your client is saying to you. And either they're going to learn listening skills or they'll never learn listening skills. It's not something they can do only halfway. You
Right.
have to learn to listen to what that client is saying to you and pick up on the nonverbal clues.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, because the second bullet point here on the next slide is about active listening. And it says that studies show that body language makes up, and I can't even believe this, it's so crazy, but I know it, I've heard this for years, 93% of communication.
I agree. You have to look for those body language clues, absolutely, positively. And if you're a good listener, then you're studying the person across from you and you're truly hearing what they're saying and you're watching. Are they crossing their arms? Are they sitting back in the chair? Are they sitting forward? Are they engaged? Are they making direct eye contact with you? Are they looking over your head behind you at what else is going on? And then they're not engaged in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And look up above. The smartphones, right? I hate,
Right.
I love my smartphone, which is part of the problem in life, right? Is we all love these things, and you got to put them away. People have to learn to put those aside, put that down. We don't need to respond to every beep, buzz, vibration, ringtone, jingle while we're doing something as important as having this type of discussion. I completely agree with you, Leslie.
Me too.
Do you find that listening skills can be taught? You've talked about training your staff. Like, what have you done to help people learn to be better listeners?
In all honesty, it really depends upon what stage of life they're at. If they're young and eager to learn and open-minded, absolutely positively, they will take the advice from someone who's, negotiated several business deals over the course of 20 years, and they're willing to take my advice. And when I say to them, it's time for you to shut your mouth and not say anything until you're sure your client or your customer is done expressing themselves completely, they will take that advice. And it's actually a difficult skill to learn. Sometimes you're just eager to jump in on the conversation or add your 2 cents. You must learn when to keep your mouth shut. It's a very important skill. I learned it back when I was 19 years old, and I still practice it to this day. I genuinely know when to shut my mouth and listen to what my client is saying. Honestly, I don't know the exact statistics on this, but I would say about 50 to 60% of the time, your customer or your client will tell you how to close them, what they need to close this deal. And if you listen carefully, they tell you what they need. And you don't have to sit there and guess, oh, was it my price? Was it my service? Was it the scope of services? You don't have to guess. If you just listen to what they're saying, they will tell you how to close them.
Yep, absolutely. That's a beautiful point. And I want us to keep that in mind and talk about it more as we go through, because I agree, often selling and trying to negotiate a deal is all about finding what success looks like to the other person and delivering it to them. And like you said, they'll tell you. They want to tell you because they want to be sold the thing that they need as opposed to what you're trying to give them sometimes, right?
Right.
Mutual respect, I have down here, people tend to live up to expectations. So I believe when I send out emails, for example, I'm doing this negotiation that's been a little tense on behalf of a client right now. And when they asked me to take it over, and I said, of course, I'm glad to do this for you. The first note I sent to the counterparty that they had was very gracious. Dear so-and-so, my name is Francine Love. I represent so-and-so. They've asked me to help bring this deal to conclusion. I can't wait to work with you and to hear about, what it is that we can do to make this work. I'm reviewing the materials right now. I'll be in touch with you in the next 24 hours to set up a time. Please let me know what your schedule looks like. But, that was the tone of what I sent, right? I wanted them to feel like being handed to a lawyer wasn't bad, that it was going to be someone who treated them nicely and respectfully and set a good tone. And I can tell you that, and these are discussions I'm having real time. I had one, again, picking up this negotiation this morning, 3 hours ago. what my client described as their experience with the person and what I've had have been night and day. We've had pleasant, positive interaction that is very much geared toward resolving any open issues and getting the deal done. So I think I tried to set an expectation of, we're going to treat each other nicely, we're going to work through the issues, and we're going to get this deal done, or we're going to decide we're both going to walk away. That's fine. And I think people live up to that. Is that something that you've seen in your career too, Leslie?
I absolutely agree. And I save a certain term in my head called even Steven. And yes. I do remind myself walking into a meeting, and I have to say to myself, I'm even Steven. I want to make sure that, the gazillion things that you have to do at home, and the kids need this for school the next day, and the spouse needs this from you. Mm-hmm. Check that at the door. That has to stay behind you. You're walking into a meeting and your main focus is the client or a customer in front of you. And you remind yourself, I am the even Steven in this relationship. What this person wants from me is, like you said, mutual respect, an even-tempered mannerism, and an agreement to work together, that you're part of that person's team. And everything else that's going on in your head needs to be left at the door and just parked. And you can get back to it later. You can get back to the mental to-do list after the meeting, because the mental to-do list is always going to be there.
It will be. Absolutely. I like the even Steven. When I was growing up, Leslie, I know this will shock you about me, but people could look at me and read my thoughts based on my expression. Apparently, I wouldn't have played poker well as a younger person. And it's been something that I have to really train myself when I'm in a meeting like this to not be like, where you go, what? or you just like, I can't believe you said that. And it's really learning, what are your weaknesses, right? You have to think about it. And I think that's what you were saying before, like, I'm even Steven, keep it at the door, walk in. Mm-hmm. I have to do that too. Like, don't show everything you feel right now. They may say something intended to shock you. They may try to provoke you. They may try and think that gives them an edge, but it can't. I have to be even Steven. So
I have to be even Steven, right? I have to be in balance, that, what's going on in my head is not necessarily how I'm feeling in my heart right now, and I have work to do with my hands. So it's another little thing that I think of before I walk into a meeting. Head, heart, and hands, and everything needs to be in balance before I walk into that meeting.
I love that. Thank you.
I did borrow it from someone else, so I have to give him credit.
He's not on the phone.
Yeah. Good.
Which leads us right into honesty. No.
Exactly.
What I said before. If you lie and it gets discovered, you've lost credibility. You've lost everything. Be very careful in a negotiation. I never say, I can't, I won't. It must be. Like, I don't draw lines in the sand unless I mean it, right? It has to be true. If it's not true, if I'm just saying, we would never give in on this, and then after, an hour I say, okay, well, you can have that, I'm losing credibility. I can't make stands or take statements that are positional unless I mean that position.
Right. Honesty, it keeps the conversation simple. You don't want to have a second conversation with someone and forget why you told that first time around. So, don't oversell your services, and then underpromise to the client. You truly want to say what you mean, that if this is what I'm promising you, these are the obligations that I will fulfill to you. And that person needs to trust that you're being upfront and honest with them.
That's right. We've talked a little bit about this before, but I think it's very important, is developing a good rapport. And Leslie, you're awesome at this. Like, I think you could talk to a rock and they would have a great conversation with you. Find something.
Depends on the rock.
But what are some things that you do to establish good rapport when you first sit down to meet, to do a negotiation with someone?
Well, certainly you don't want to prejudge someone. You don't want to walk into that room and just prejudge them based upon the way they look. Everybody has similar feelings, similar issues, similar family lives at home. So certainly I do like the idea of finding the common ground. There's always something you have in common with that person. Maybe you're a foodie and you love, this type of restaurant, or maybe, you're an avid book reader and you just finished a great book, but there's always going to be something and you just need to find it, right? So say you're a young professional, say you're, young 20 somethings, and now the customer in front of you is, an older gray haired gentleman in his late 60s. And you're saying to yourself, what could I possibly have in common with this person that we're going to find common ground? Sometimes maybe there's no extracurricular activity that you're going to find that's going to be common ground, but I find just being yourself and small talk and being humble and modest and just treating that person as if the situation was reversed and how would you want to be treated. You're just going to have to find that friendly rapport between you and the person in front of you. Hopefully it is something like that you just discovered you both like Thai food, and isn't there this great Thai restaurant that you want to try? Maybe it's not that simple. Maybe it's just something as simple as, oh, did you grow up on Long Island? Did you grow up in the city? And share an experience that you had in your past. I always find that a person remembers me more based upon telling them a story or an experience than maybe just some offhanded comment.
Absolutely. And I believe that all plays into the psychology of negotiations, which is getting people used to saying yes and liking you, right?
Agreed.
So if I'm doing, like, the small talk is wonderful. Like, I've made some great friends over negotiations where afterwards, hey, let's be buds, let's talk and let's keep up a relationship outside of this. But I've found that if you get into a habit of them saying yes, agreeing with you, liking you, saying, oh, I remember that, we share that, it brings you from being on opposite sides of the table to being on the same side of the table.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that they had taught me at least 20, 25 years ago, is that when you're having the negotiations with the customer that's looking to buy a car, get them into the habit of saying yes. Mm-hmm. Did you like this particular feature on the car? Yes. Do you think that this particular car will be able to suit your family's needs for the next 5 to 7 years? Yes. And keep asking them questions that you absolutely positively know is a yes response, just to get them in the groove of the negotiation, so that if you do hit the no, okay, well, you're prepared. Like, okay, right. 7 out of the 8 items or objectives that I brought up, you said yes to. Maybe there's only one small objective left that we need to process. Right.
Absolutely. And all of this of building the good rapport, building this culture of yes, building this great conversation gets us to a good end result. I put down a couple tips. One of the things I do when I go into a new negotiation, I look up people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn profiles are really helpful. You can get a look at them ahead of time, often if they have their headshot up. You can read about their background. You can see some people list nonprofits or other interests that they have, that you could already know about some of those commonalities before you walk in. And if they have their own business, you can look up their website. And, I found it very helpful to say, wow, I looked at your website. I loved the design of X, or I thought this was a great product here, or I loved how you described Y, or you had a great culture that came through. I read your company's mission statement, and I think that's excellent. Here's how I believe we can really work together because we agree on these things. So doing
Absolutely. That's a great tip.
Yep. Doing that little bit of background can really help you. We've talked about this already, but people should remember in negotiations, it's not a zero-sum game. No one should approach a negotiation as I have to win everything and you get nothing. We want to make, I love the idea of expanding the circle so that everyone wins. How do I put more things in so that everyone feels like they got something out of the deal and no one feels like they got taken from it? Because if someone feels like they got taken, it's a bad deal. They'll never do business with you again. They're going to come away with a bad feeling. And you may have won that round, but you won't win for the long run.
Agreed.
preparing for the discussion, we've talked about some of these things. Pick the right time and place. I put this down because I had one of my junior attorneys at another job. He was just cranky in the morning. Like, you just didn't want to talk to him. And we would sometimes schedule things for, like espresso o'clock, like after he'd had whatever he needed to kind of become human again. I say that because sometimes people don't feel good in the morning. Sometimes they, you get your afternoon sleepies. Pick the right time and place. Pick what works for you. Do your homework. Think critically and objectively. Remember, when you go into a negotiation, there's someone else looking to get something out of it as well. You need to think about their perspective too, and not just your own. And have questions ready to ask the person that you're negotiating with so that you can better understand where they're coming from. Leslie, do you have
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. It is a very important tip that you're sharing, preparing for that discussion. You can't just walk in cold. You really do need to do your homework. And that's a very, very important tip, and it's a good life lesson to learn. You're coming into that, like you said, this isn't so I can win every single time, but there's a value placed upon the person that walks into that meeting prepared. So exactly what you just said. If you know the person you're meeting with is not a morning person, do not try and meet them at 7:45 a.m. at the local diner. Mm-hmm. Be prepared. This is a person maybe that comes alive after 3 o'clock, and you're going to get the best communication out of that person at 3 o'clock. Do your homework and be prepared for that. I absolutely do my research before going into a client meeting, simply because I want that person at ease, and I want them to realize, again, I am on their side. I am here to be of service to them. I am not there to be in an adversarial relationship. If it's an adversarial relationship, then maybe I'm not the right accounting or bookkeeping service for you. I should be a member of your team. And being a member of your team means I know when this person wants to meet with me. They don't want to meet with me at 7:45 a.m., but they're more than happy to do hot pretzels and mustard at 3 p.m.
Are you sharing your tips for dealing with me, Leslie?
Yes, I am. I did win somebody over with the hot pretzels mustard, and there was cheese sauce there too. So I definitely won them over with the cheese sauce.
Well done.
Thank you.
I put together some questions that you can use when you have a counterparty who's working cooperatively. Like, here are just some sample questions that I've used in the past, and I know that can work. Why do you think that? Or I use this one all the time. How have you resolved this issue previously? In fact, I talked about it this morning. They had a position, we had an opposite position. And I said, look, I know we're not the first people that you've ever worked with that feel this way. What have you done in the past to resolve this? How have you gotten over the hump? And it really opened up a great dialogue where they were able to share some of the things they've done that helped allay their fears. And I was like, there are a couple of those things that we would be willing to agree to. So I love that second question. How can we think creatively together? This fourth one I use in every negotiation that I sit down in. What does success look like to you? Because I want the other person to be successful. If they feel successful, then they will want to do business with us again. What can get us both to where we want to go? And have you encountered this issue before? Leslie, do you have any go-to questions that have worked for you?
I like the questions.
Nice in the sandbox, just to clarify.
Yeah, obviously. I love when everybody plays nicely in the sandbox. And as a little story about one of my experiences, I was with a multi-medical practice for, I believe I serviced them for probably about 10 years, which is, a decent client for a very long time. But, as medical practices are being absorbed by Northwell, et cetera, they were purchased, and obviously then they bring in their accounting team, which was fine. But the success looked to me when I would walk into that room and there were 8 physician partners in that room. 8 partners meant 16 or 17 personalities in the room. So you had to have your A game prepared. But I did know what their goal was, right? Each of these partners all had a vested interest in seeing that practice succeed. And my role to be of service to them, which I do want to stress that point about being of service, is that I know my role. My role is to feed them important financial data so they can make their decisions. Their biggest issue prior to them engaging my services was that they felt disconnected from their business, right? So they're all physicians, they're all seeing patients, but when they had their partner meetings, they didn't know, where do we stand? How are we doing? They never really had a clean set of financial statements. They never had someone who would sit down and discuss it with them at the partner meeting. So I knew what their hot point was. Their hot point was, we need to know what's going on. We can't just see patients. It's important to us that this practice survives. So that one question I feel is a very important topic. What does success look like to you? Know what your client is trying to accomplish here. How do they get from point A to point B? And that comes from my level of technical expertise. Can I provide this service properly to them? And they're being able to speak informally with me and then saying to me, look, we see patients all day long, but we don't know what's going on in our business, and we need to know. And they asked questions such as, like, what is your impressions of our practice? Just someone that they knew I would give them a brutally honest answer.
That's awesome. And I love your concept of how can I be of service to you? That's beautiful. And I think
it's very important that people think that way. I know, everyone, trying to close the deal and blah, blah, blah. And I just feel, honestly, with good karma, it comes back to you. And again, I'm quoting someone else. I'm actually quoting Jimmy Iovine, who's a famous record producer. And He said the same thing. When he's trying to get a client to sign with his record label, he is of the mindset, how can I be of service to them? And he stays in that modest, humble position. And I feel that's very important. I try and make sure I'm of service in every negotiation setting.
That's awesome. I have now on the next slide some questions to ask when people are being aggressive, right? We've all been in a negotiation where someone thinks they're going to win. And I love dealing with bullies because I found in all of my life I can beat the bully every time.
Right.
But it's always fun to watch them try to be, the bully in the room. So here are some questions that I've used when the counterparty is being really aggressive. Could you run that by me again, right? Which I love when they're trying to be personally insulting. Like, you're like, oh, I'm sorry, could you run that past me again? Because they hate repeating it. They love that they did it. But when they think that you missed it or you deliberately misunderstood it, that's just a lot of fun. But was that intended as an insult? Asked kind of naively and smiling. Do you usually have to resort to threats? Is fun. Should I be in a meeting with someone less emotionally invested? And also, what do you suggest we do now since it's clear you don't intend to negotiate in good faith? That one I use rarely. But the others I've done where it's like, I'm sorry, what? Did you really say that? I have done that when people have just been out of control, obnoxious. And like I said before, one of the things I've done is if someone is being rude or being condescending or using profanity and just being, out of control, I sit there, I smile, and I take copious notes of everything they're saying. It stops them. No one wants to be reported being a jerk. What have you done?
That's terrific. I have to say, knock wood, I've been very lucky. I don't usually have a lot of aggressive encounters. I certainly do have maybe a business owner that maybe is a little condescending at times. Most of the time I'm comfortable enough in my own skin at this stage to stay quiet and let them say whatever they're going to say, because I just remember, like, I'm here to fulfill a need. I'm here to provide a service. If that person needs to talk about themselves, about how wonderful they are, okay, I'll sit here and listen. If it ever got to the point where the client was just being too aggressive in their nature, then probably I'm not a good match, right? Then probably there's another service provider maybe that matches that level of emotionalness, then I'm not that person. So I probably wouldn't engage. I mean, you're in that position where you have to engage with this person because you're in negotiations. I think as a service provider, I'm lucky enough that I'm able to say, I might not be the right person to you because
Right.
I'm just going to stay even this whole time.
Right.
And it looks like you're looking for a little bit more aggression.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, I firmly believe if things are getting really hot and ridiculous, that's when you say, hey, it's time to take a break. Let's take 5. Let's take,
Yeah.
whatever. Let's meet tomorrow. It seems like today's not working. Let's do, don't be afraid to call a timeout. You don't want to ever get to where you lose your cool and you become part of the problem.
It's too bad you can't put adults in a timeout chair, just like little kids. You go in the timeout chair right now.
I have a few I'd put there. That would be lovely.
You should have one in your office, the timeout chair.
So the next one, we've talked some of these things already, preparing for a discussion. Know your key ideas, your desired takeaways. I also try to identify items that I can give or trade. Things that I think in my preparation might be valuable to the other side. And I make sure that I'm able to give them some things. Okay, I know it's important for you to be able to list us as a client. Well, then, yes, I want to give that. And I offer that. Like, here I want to give you these things to where we begin an exchanging, right? Just like I try and create a culture of yes, I try and create a culture of reciprocal exchange. Let me give you this. Let me do this for you. Let me make this better for you. And then you start getting that back. And so if you go into the meeting having identified some things that you think are important to them and that they will want to trade, then that helps. And anticipate their objections and counter arguments. Those are all very good things to do before you head into a negotiation.
And being able to process their objections, I feel, is very important. And that may just come with experience of being in several negotiating settings. I think when you're younger and first starting out, maybe it's a little bit more difficult to understand what is the best way to process these objections, but everything can be handled calmly, and you speak from your experiences, and you go one by one through the objection process to make sure, well, what's the goal of negotiation? The goal is that we're going to get to a favorable outcome for everybody. So you just need to take your time and process one by one.
That's right. And that leads us perfectly into what's the purpose of the negotiation, right? It's to get to this favorable outcome. And you also, in addition to knowing what your favorable outcome is, you need to know what your best alternative to a negotiated agreement is. And that's called BATNA. I threw that in there because if you read about negotiating, you'll read about BATNA. But basically, what is it? What happens if you walk away? In every negotiation, you must be willing to walk away. If you're not, you are in what is called a hostage negotiation, and that's very, very different. That's not the type of negotiation we're talking about here. Every negotiation has to be something that you're willing to walk away from, and you need to know what it is that will make you walk away. Otherwise, you're just gonna roll on everything. Otherwise, you're going to get a bad deal. And you need to think about it. What's my walk away plan? Think about what's their walk away plan. Because if that's their worst or best alternative to doing a deal with you, then you want to make sure that you compel them to not have to choose that and to instead do a deal with you.
So again, what you said about being prepared walking into that meeting, you also need to know what is my best alternative. So it's a matter of being prepared walking into that meeting and not being afraid to walk away, right? If we're going nowhere and this isn't working, you can't be afraid to walk away.
That's right. That isn't the deal for you then. If someone is going to be that difficult to get to an agreement with, I would rather walk away and find the right client, the right counterparty, the right vendor, the right supplier, than be in a relationship that is difficult where we're all expecting bad things to happen, right? I want it to be a good relationship that we're able to build for mutual respect and trust going forward.
Agreed.
The next slide is talking about, with our goal, understand your why. Everyone talks about this now. I love Simon Sinek, and he's been very popular, and he has talked about know your why. Let the other side understand why you're doing this, why you're trying to accomplish this. When people relate to you, they're more willing to work with you. We talked about, too, anchoring. I think you used the word before, Leslie, that studies have shown that the first person to make an offer basically lays down an anchor, and that dictates the ultimate outcome of the negotiation. And so research and negotiation theory says that you should be the person to put out the first offer. That's not revealing too much. That's setting the stage. Think about it. If you go in and you have a negotiation with someone, how much you don't say, how much do you want to pay me? I want to pay you $1. That's what well, now I'm arguing from $1, as opposed to saying, I'm happy to describe my services. I do a range of things, my prices start at this to that, and giving them a range to where now we can negotiate in the range I've set rather than from some impossibly low or impossibly high number that someone has laid out. Do you ever encounter
It's also important. Yeah, it's also important, like you said. So the first offer is the anchor, and that dictates the ultimate outcome. That's agreed. I also want to stress the importance of, if you're the person listening in this conversation and you're the person that's trying to absorb what that other person wants to reach as a goal, it's also important not to be the first person to speak, right? If you want the other person to be the one to start that negotiation, again, know when to stop speaking and allow that person to tell you how, they anticipate the outcome of the negotiation. So sometimes it may be an awkward, uncomfortable silence, but you need to be able to be comfortable through that and sit there quietly and let that person be the first one to talk and put their offer out there for you. And again, I know from training my staff that they do find that difficult. They don't want to sit there in this uncomfortable silence, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to just sit silently until that person kind of shows their cards, in a sense, and says, here's the offer I'm willing to put out on the table.
Mm-hmm. And if for some reason someone puts down an anchor that is either too high or too low, you don't have to panic. You're not now doomed to a terrible outcome. What you do is what I said in the second bullet point, is you basically ignore it and you start the negotiation over. It's kind of a fun trick to do, but you say,
right.
Oh, okay, well, I understand that. Let me explain to you why that doesn't necessarily work in this situation, or some phraseology that basically says, okay, we're going to set that aside, and now we're going to try again once we understand what the facts are that we're working within. And so you can put it aside. It just, there are ways to deal with it if you get stuck with a bad anchor. One thing I've done in negotiations, I have this here as a third bullet, is sometimes you may want to give them a bunch of options. Well, do you want option A? Do you want option B? Do you want option C? And kind of it gives you a chance to have them react to multiple offers, multiple factors, and it can help you get to a quicker understanding of what they value more over the other. And so that's a trick if you're trying to cut down time in understanding what it is that they want.
It's just like house hunters. They give you 3 houses to choose from. Do you want to be close to the beach? Do you want to have the finished kitchen? It's just like house hunters.
But I love it, because someone says, well, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a basket weaver. And then, what's your budget? Oh, $3.2 million,
Right. I'm always surprised by that too.
Never understood that association, but okay. But I am addicted to house hunters.
Me too. I'm addicted to HGTV.
Toward a goal, I have a couple things here. We've talked about a few, but one I wanted to quote Ronald Reagan: trust but verify, right? If you're in a new, working with a new counterparty, right, and you're not quite sure if they're going to live up to all their obligations under this deal, one of the things you can structure your final agreement on is to have milestones for completion, where either the payment comes after certain things are done, or stock is vested over certain time frames. But you can approach a business deal where it's not everything's done immediately, but it can be done incrementally so that you can see if this is a trustworthy counterparty. So I just wanted to say, don't do a negotiation thinking that it's a one and done. Oftentimes we have a series of negotiations, a series of events that take place as the outcome. and we know how well we're doing based on that. And I think the other two we've talked a lot about here in our discussions so far. Leslie, do you have any comments on what's on this screen?
I like your concept of trust but verify. You certainly want to go into the negotiation with a good attitude and an open mind, but you should verify the information that the other person is presenting to you. Not that you don't trust them, but it is important to be prepared.
Mm-hmm. And then the last couple slides are just some quotes that I liked about negotiations. The first one is about the power of silence. About counting to 10, and by the time that's done, the other person will start talking and very well may, either counter offer themselves or raise their own or fill the gap or inadvertently tell you what they want, right? So silence is golden. I liked the one by J. Paul Getty that you got to let the other side make money too, because if you always have the reputation that you always make all the money, you're not going to get deals. People will learn it and they'll stay away from you. And the one by Martin Levin, I just loved. If you're planning on doing business with someone again, don't be too tough in negotiations. If you're going to skin a cat, don't keep it as a cat.
That's a great one. That's a great one to finish up on.
Oh, I have two more, of course. So that kills me. I liked Al Capone, and I want to explain why I picked this one. He said, you can get much farther with a kind word and a gun than you can get with a kind word alone. And that almost sounds contradictory to everything we've been talking about. But the lesson I'm taking out of Al here is that you got to come prepared, right?
Right.
It's
right.
nice you can have all the personality, you can develop all the rapport, you can know all of these great tricks and, how to really negotiate and be savvy. But if you don't have the thing that closes the deal, then you're not going to get it done. So that's what I took from Al.
I like it, though. I like that you're quoting Al Capone.
And then never cut what you can untie. Look, if there's a way to do the negotiation where someone doesn't feel cut, they don't feel hurt, they don't feel that they got taken to the cleaners, but you can untie it, make it more gentle, make it seem like a better process, then that's a smart thing to do. Do you have any
I think that's great.
Fun quotes or thoughts on, or final thoughts on negotiations, Leslie?
Well, I'm not sure if you want me to continue quoting Jimmy Iovine in this discussion,
but
there is a book. There is a book that I'm in the middle of called Quiet, the Power of Introverts. And if anyone who is listening to the webinar does feel that they're an introvert and feels as though, hey, I'm maybe not the person qualified to be in a negotiation, they might want to read the book, only because there is a secret strength in being an introvert. And certainly it actually does give you an advantage in negotiations. So I just wanted to put it out there, not everyone needs to be, this outgoing personality to feel comfortable in their negotiation skills.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for your time today, Leslie. I really appreciated having a conversation with you and getting to talk about some of your experiences and what you've learned in working with your client base throughout your career. So thank you for coming and joining me on this fun little topic.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank all of the people who joined us today on the webinar. I hope that you've learned some few tips that'll help make your negotiations better. Please feel free to reach out to either myself or to Leslie. Our contact information is there on the screen. We welcome you reaching out to us. Certainly, if you need a good bookkeeping, back office, accounting provider, then you should reach out to Leslie. She and her team at Outsource Your Books are terrific, and I'm so glad that I get to work with them and not only have Leslie as a friend, but also as a colleague. So thank you, Leslie, again for your time.
Thank you. I feel the same way about you. Thank you.
And we hope everyone has a great day. And that concludes our webinar.